I'd like to make a video on how to make a bow stringer, and this is a bow stringer I put together out of some buckskin and nettle cordage, and just nettle fibers that I twisted, and this is some buckskin from using a pattern that makes a a cup or a pocket, and then a saddle, which is what you string the bow onto. And you make a big loop like this, and you string your bow through the loop. So I think it's kind of cool. It's nice to have a good bow stringer. There's other ways to string your bow. It's, you know, if it's a heavy bow, you might want to use a bow stringer. You basically put this cup in on the foot of the bow, or the limb that has the bowstring already attached, and then this saddle sits on top of the end that you thread the bowstring through and connect it to the limb on the other side. And what you do is you step on the middle and you pull your bow up. So that's the construction, or rather that's the concept of a bow stringer, and this is kind of a loosely primitive one. It's not completely primitive because I'm using metal grommets. As you can see, that keeps the material from busting loose, even on the saddle here. And notice I've threaded the saddle through to further refine how this works, so that the string doesn't escape, the cordage doesn't escape. But you don't have to add grommets or anything like that. You don't even have to add extra slits. The concept is this sits on top of the limb that you're trying to fasten the bowstring onto, and the cup end basically sits at the foot. All right, to begin, we've got our pattern here, which is basically a T like this. I'm going to make this available for download on my website. And the dimensions are 6 inches long for the straight part of the T, and this is 5 1/4 inches long here for the top part of the T. Well, it's 1 inch wide, and this is 1.5 inches wide. But again, I'll just make it for download, and you can trace it, you can modify it, make it larger or bigger, or make your own. But this is basically what it looks like. And I have holes marked that will have to be punched out. Part of this pattern, this is a two-part pattern. Okay, so there's the cup and the saddle part of the bow stringer, and the T part will make the cup, and the top part of the T here will make the saddle. Next, I've got some twisted nettle cordage, stinging nettle cordage that I just twisted for some fibers, and this is approximately 6 feet 7 inches. You know, make it as long as you need it. It should be longer than the bow you're trying to string, obviously. Then next, I have some a remnant of some brain tan buckskin that I tanned some years ago, and it should be pretty dense. It's not too light. This is probably part of this is part of the cape, or the middle of the back, so it's thicker here. Okay, so to begin, I'm going to take a pattern that I've already punched out the holes in, and actually what I did this, I traced this pattern on a manila folder, and then I just took some packing tape and laid it out and on the front and back to basically make a lamination, so I can reuse this pattern over and over again. So that's just cheap lamination as a tip. Just use some clear packing tape. So I'm going to lay the pattern down here. And I like to use a pencil on my buckskin because it'll rub off and it won't permanently stain the material. So I'm just gonna trace this out. And then I want to mark my holes. So, alright, so it's probably hard to see on camera, but I can see where my pattern is. And that's the important part. So we'll see it when we cut this out. Alright, and then next I'm going to want to trace just the top part of the pattern, which is the saddle, which I call the saddle. I'm just going to lay it alongside and underneath the T on my pattern that I've marked out here, so I'm not wasting any of the buckskin. And I can still mark the holes the same. And then I can go ahead and connect the dot here. If you're not very sure of yourself, you can just take a straight edge, lay it out, and create your straight line to connect. Or you could just assume, just fold your pattern and lay it out. Alright, so you can't see, but we have the T here laid out, and I've taken my saddle and laid it out alongside the long part, and then the saddle goes here, like that. Alright, so we've got the pieces cut out, we've got the cuff, and we've got the saddle cut out from our main pattern, and then I've got a leather working hole punch. You know, you could carefully use a knife to punch out your holes, or a rock or whatever, but for speed I'm just using this modern tool. And basically I just take the hole punch and I punch out my holes. And actually what I should do is, to be accurate, is fold it over and punch out my hole from one side, from both sides, and it is. Make sure I get the other side. Sometimes it goes through really easily, sometimes it does not. And there it is. Alright, so here's the pattern. We've got the holes punched out for the cup, and also the holes cut out for the saddle. And so now what we want to do is we want to be able to fold this or put this together. Alright, so for the bowstringer, what I'm going to cover is how the construction of the cup is. So essentially you take your wings and you fold them underneath each other like that, and then like a scorpion, this is the tongue or the tail will go back and then through. And then what you want to do is you want to align. There was 2 holes on the tongue that you want to align with, and that's where you tack it down with a grommet, or if you choose not to put a hole here, you can just sew or make a button or something like that. So essentially what happens is you basically have this fixture that looks something like this. So it goes backwards like a scorpion's tail. Alright, so we're about to put this together, and I've got some grommets here. These are what's called grommets, and what you do is you hammer them down. They're little metal pieces that, you know, whatever it is that you are making, and you're going to run a string through it, and it's going to have tension or something. You want to reinforce the edges, and so there's little metal pieces that you can make, that you can buy or make if you do blacksmithing that are called grommets. And I've got some this size and I've got some this size. And for this piece, because there's a lot of stress on the bowstringer, I'm going to put grommets in. And I've taken another piece, a thinner piece of buckskin, and reinforced one of the pieces that is going to have the most stress on the grommet. The other thing is that in the construction of this piece, it's kind of easier to cheat and use grommets to pin down the pieces. But for this, I want to kind of display, again, sort of a primitive aspect to this. Again, you have to be able to smelt down raw ore in order to make metal, and then have the skill to make something like this, this fine and this small to make a grommet. So I'm kind of going to blend this tutorial just a little bit, and just so people have a perspective on both sides of things. All right, so basically the construction of your cup for the bowstringer is, again, we take the T shape that we cut out, and we take the two, we'll call these wings, we take the two wings, and we'll fold them underneath each other like that. And then we'll take the tongue, we'll call this the tongue, and we'll take the tongue and we'll pull it backwards, okay, and feed it through the loop that we just made. And what we're doing is we're just going to pull everything through. Until we get a piece that looks like this on the side. And then here's the front. And then here's the back. So what I'm going to do is I could take a small grommet and pierce this through the holes here all the way through and hammer it down, and then we have a grommeted piece, and that would tack it in place. That's one way to do it. But what I'm preferring to do instead is I'm going to go ahead and sew it. And I'm just going to sew through this layer, and then the next layer, so that it's all held in place. So we have a piece like this. And then we're going to put a bigger grommet in the front, or in the tongue like that.